Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Revert Corner. And today we will be talking about Ramadan challenges, blessings, and lessons. And we will be joined today by our extra special guest. Of course, I'm also joined by my co host, Carl. How's it going, Carl?
Assalamu
Everything good with
alaikum.
you? Alaikum
Alhamdulillah,
assalam
good,
wa
thanks.
rahmatullah. And we'll be joined today by our guest, Abdullah Luxi, the Luxi from Luxembourg. Abdullah, maybe you can just tell us, just to introduce yourself and tell us a little about perhaps how you came to Islam, how you found out about the religion of Islam, and maybe a few interesting things about yourself for our audience, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakum Allah
Wa
khairan for the invitation. I'm Abdullah Luxi. I'm from Luxembourg. I became Muslim in 2002 in Senegal, in the headquarters of an extreme Sufi cult called Al Muridiyya, which are the followers of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Mbacké. And the reason why I came to Islam was, first of all, questioning life, especially at age 15 and onwards, and at age 17, like the questioning really peaked. And after returning to Christianity and going back to church and reading the Bible, I saw that light was not in there, and I had to look for something else. And subhanallah, 2 years later, or 1 year later, say, my last year at the boarding school, where I was finishing my secondary studies, Allah decreed that 2 new Muslims were going to join that boarding school. And, the boarding school is a really strange place. You are locked up 5 days a week with a certain crowd, and that's all you see. And you're not allowed to leave the place, of course. So, it becomes extremely intense. So the people that you bond with really deeply, and you get to know everyone really deeply. You get to know, their dark sides. You get to know their fears. You get to know things they've been through in life. And subhanallah, these 2 converts, I clicked with them straight away. They were French, but from Belgium. Their parents were, these neo hippies, and the mother had, left the father and just fled to Senegal with the boys. And they embraced Islam in that particular Sufi cult. And their influence led me to go to Senegal later on and embrace Islam in that particular Sufi cult. But as far as Ramadan is concerned, I remember that the more I was spending time with these guys, the more I became interested in Islam. And when the Ramadan came, I observed them, and it blew me away. Like, at the boarding school, we're living in a dorm. Everybody has their own room, if that's what you want to call it. Like, you can touch both your walls with your hands. It's really extremely cramped. And I remember in the dark before dawn, they would go to each other's room, prepare sahur, and then they would fast all day. And then during the hours where we had to stay in our rooms and study with our windows open, where the overseer, the supervisor could observe what we're doing and had to make sure that we're studying, they would go, once again, they were allowed to go to each other's room just to break fast and pray together. And what amazed me is really that, unlike what I was practicing, which was Christianity, that religion had substance to it. From the matter of belief, it was so much clearer. And in the matter of practice, there was, as a matter of fact, a practice. Unlike, I'm sorry to say, Christianity, you will not differentiate between a Christian and an atheist in daily life. Like, when it comes down to whatever dealings, whatever practices, whatever routines, there is really no difference. And I felt that the only way that I could fix my my questions and just my way of life, there had to be some kind of practice. That was my understanding of spirituality. And I saw these kids practice that. And 2 years later in Senegal, I went to Senegal. I had to find an excuse to go to Senegal. So I went to Senegal with some very dubious NGO kind of project. And for me, it was just a way to, to convince myself that I didn't go to Senegal just to embrace Islam. All right. And so while I was in Dakar, this is the capital city, I took a trip to the headquarters of that particular sect. And I spent the whole day over there. And I was impressed by what I saw. Once again, what I saw was practice. No matter how batil it was, when you come from the world of Christianity, like a brother said back in England, like you compare the worst Sufi nutheads to Christianity, you will look at those Sufis as having Tawheed. And so, alhamdulillah, I embraced Islam, and I came after still dangling for 2 weeks in this kind of environment that was heavily Sufi influenced, although I was not staying in their headquarters. I came back to Brussels, and that's where the journey started, I would say, on the wrong track.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, isn't it, really, where Allah guides us through many different routes. And I think if anyone said, I just became Muslim and I was on the right path and did everything 100% perfect from the get-go, it wouldn't be realistic. Obviously everyone has their journeys, and even within those journeys they have their own kind of little mini journeys and developing. Obviously there are 3 brothers I know, alhamdulillah, they were blessed to be able to be with some I don't know, masajid, or they were close to certain masajid, or maybe they embraced through a masajid that were very close to the sunnah, which is a great blessing. But obviously for many of us, we had to kind of navigate through a strange path here and there, or have different meetings to kind of open up our eyes to practices within Islam maybe that aren't upon the sunnah and things like this. Just before we get into the crux of the conversation, Abdullah, we have a kind of tradition here on the Revert Corner to start the episode with a ayah or hadith. And so today, as Matt is not here, we have Carl, inshallah, bringing us something. So if you can bring us the hadith or the ayah of the day, Carl, and then we'll get into the Ramadan discussion, inshallah.
Well, today it's a surprise one today. I didn't go for something about Ramadan. Instead, we have the hadith of Osama bin Zayd, which is recorded in An-Nasa'i and other places, that he asked the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I don't see you fast. Oh, he said, oh Rasulullah, oh Messenger of Allah, I don't see you fast any month like I see you fast the month of Sha'ban. And of course, for those who are unaware of the Islamic months, right now is the month of Sha'ban, the month before Ramadan. And so the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that that's a month where people are mostly heedless of it. It's between the month of Rajab and between the month of Ramadan. It's the month when the actions are raised to the Lord of all the worlds. And I love that I be fasting when my actions are raised up. And the reason why I chose this hadith is because when I remember my first ever Ramadan, or my first time fasting, it was in Ramadan. And lots of converts, they have this anticipation, if you like, of the first fasting experience, what it's going to be like. And actually, your first fasting experience doesn't have to be Ramadan. There's nothing that, of course, Ramadan is the obligatory one, and you have to fast in Ramadan. But the opportunity to have those supererogatory fasts is there. And the Messenger of Allah used to fast this month. So yeah, you can lose the anticipation and start fasting today.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well, because you you kind of, you know, like you said, you kind of get nervous with that anticipation, like being out for Ramadan, and you know, you could always take this sunnah, like you said, of fasting in Sha'ban or whatever, and you know, even have a practice yourself. If it's like you became Muslim last month and in 2 months is Ramadan and it's like extremely you know, an anxious time for you, why not try at least, you know, that way if you fail as well, if you don't follow through with the fast, it's not something that's
Yeah, no
obligatory.
problem, man.
That's quite a good point. So Jazakallah khair for that, Carl, and also for the viewers who are listening as well, who are in Sha'ban, maybe they can take advantage of this benefit, inshallah, and start fasting from now as well, and gain some reward, inshallah. So that brings us into the main discussion, which is obviously Revert Ramadan, the first Ramadan, or maybe the first few kind of Ramadans. And so we'll get the ball rolling with Abdullah. I think you've got, you know, some things to say on the topic, right? So maybe you can give us a bit of an insight. Did you have your first Ramadan in Luxembourg or Brussels, or where was it exactly?
Or Senegal.
No, first Ramadan was in Brussels. I only
Oh.
stayed 1 month in Senegal, and I came back to Brussels and resumed my university life. And I kept my Islam secret from my family quite a long time. So as I was living away, it was quite easy. And unfortunately, having received my first Islamic education in Senegal, as I said, I was on the wrong tracks. It's an unfortunate fact. The further away you go from Arab-speaking people, the deeper the jahl is going to be. The Arabic language is really something that preserves Islam, because the mere fact of just understanding the Quran as it is always going to keep people within fairly close boundaries of the haqq, especially on very basic matters.
What do you mean by jahal? Just for the those of the audience who may not know, what do we mean by when we say jahal?
Jahl just means ignorance, and
Okay.
jahl is one of the most blameworthy traits that a Muslim can have. Jahl is a state, and it is also an attitude, and it is a behavior. And obviously, when you live, you have to understand that the French, they have hunted down the Tawarik Arabic teachers on the west coast of Africa. The French understood very well that the Arabic language was foundational to the preservation of Islam. And while during the years of colonization of West Africa, they literally hunted down the Arabic teachers and slaughtered them. So you had, you know, the Tawarik tribe that, you know, roamed the Sahara and you know, that whole West African part of the continent. They speak Arabic. They're Africans, but they speak perfect Arabic, and they have a very strong tradition of memorization. You know, they're connected to Mauritania, and you know, you had this whole Islamic knowledge network that was present in that particular area, area of Africa. And the French, they dealt it a devastating blow by removing the Arabic language from the equation. And you see that in combination with extreme Sufism, the foundations of the religion erode very quickly. So to give you an example, the way I learned it is that, yeah, you pray 5 times a day. If you pray on time, that's obviously better. But, you know, if you're busy, you can catch up your 5 prayers before going to bed.
All 5?
If you're too tired yeah. And I've done that. I've done that for a long time, brother. Okay? That was not like a matter of days. I've done that over months.
Wow.
And
that's quite common in UK, I think. Some Muslims, you know, they I when I remember when I was first practicing, and then you know, I was praying my salah, And then there was one guy who's a manager guy, and he was like, yeah, I just pray the 5. I just pray it when I get home. And I was very confused. I was like, what?
Yeah, and then you have level 2. That's all. You're too tired today. Tomorrow you pray double. You pray Fajr twice. You pray Dhuhr twice. You pray Asr twice, like that. Okay. Tomorrow, after tomorrow, you pray triple. And what happens? And it actually happened to one of those 2 guys that was at the boarding school with me. He let a bunch of salawat pile up like that, and you just give up. Okay, today I'm supposed to pray everything
50.
10 times.
Yeah.
You just back off, and you just
Yeah.
at this stage might just as well. And this is really that's the problem of this ignorance. Praying takes minutes.
Yeah.
Minutes. All right, we
You know,
find
you
time
said
for so many things.
You said
So
about
anyway,
it being that extreme cult. So it's often cults have a way of tying you in. So was it hard to leave it?
oof, well, that's a whole other story. That particular cult where I
Okay.
became Muslim, I did not really pledge allegiance or anything like that. I left the same day. I know I was on a day trip. So I just took
Okay.
Shahada there, and it was wonderful,
Alhamdulillah.
But then a week later, a rival cult wanted to have me as their poster boy.
Uh-huh.
And these guys, they snatched me. And brother, I was spooked out. I was spooked out.
What
to a
is
point.
what is a rival cult?
We're gonna go far off topic here, brother.
Maybe let's bring it back then. That can be another episode though, because it
that
seems
can be
like
another episode. Yeah.
it almost seems like we like, because when I almost discussed with you first coming on the show, you did kind of mention that you'd be interested to go into the groups and this and that, whatever. And I guess to some extent, your journey has created the background for your knowledge in that field. So that almost deserves its own kind of episode. So instead of getting into that, let's bring it back to the first Ramadan in Brussels. So you've come away. I don't know if you're with which cult, but let's say now, in terms of you're new Muslim. You said that you had your Islam secret, right? And you were going to go about this Ramadan.
Yeah, well, back in Brussels, I wasn't part of any cult. I was the lone sheep that the wolf was about to pounce upon. So I'm practicing my deen in this way of, I'm going to uni during the day, come home, tired, whatnot, postpone. I just gotta pray now. I don't know. I mean, I knew how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. That's it. At Tashahhud, it took me ages to memorize Tashahhud. So, I'd be with the book, all right, to transliteration, in Tashahhud, like At-Tahiyyatu Lillahi. It was painful because you're praying. So do the math. It's 17 rak'ah, all in one go. You don't understand a word you're saying. It's difficult, and it becomes
because you were praying the 5 at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is in the Ramadan.
No, that was before Ramadan. Now
Ramadan. Okay.
So that's like between summer and Ramadan. Ramadan in that year must have been, I guess,
January, right?
No, I think a bit before. I think it was like November.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was around November, if I'm not mistaken. But I might be wrong.
Even for me, I mean, the tashahhud in the salah, I think maybe for the first 2 or 3 years of Islam, I had kind of like the basics of the salah down, but there was one part, I don't know if it was the whole tashahhud or just one part of it or like half of it, that I would just say in English, because there was like parts of my Islam, like when I was beginning, actually before I was Muslim, I had a fortress of a Muslim, and I basically saw like my ideology to some extent before I took Shahada, or before I entered Islam properly and started praying. My ideology was like, we're all kind of like, people who are on the side of God, whether you're, I don't know, in my mind, it was like whether you're a Rasta, whether you're a Christian, or whether you're whatever, if you're on the side of God, then you just all have different tools. So I was like being introduced to some of the Muslims' tools. And so I was like, oh, these are quite good tools. So I had Fortress of a Muslim. And I would say, for example, the dua of leaving and coming to the house in English. So I was memorizing some of these du'as in English. So for that reason, I think when I just started, and then you kind of get lazy. You kind of, maybe you memorize the prayer and you memorize certain aspects of it. And then I just knew this part in the end in English. And then I think there was one brother, I think one of my teachers who helped me learn reading Arabic Quran. I must have said to him, oh yeah, I just, he was like, so the tahajjud, right? And I was like, yeah, pretty much. Just this bit at the end I do in English. He was like, what? No, you can't do that in English. That's not how this works, mate. So yeah, but
even for me, I memorized it, well, not in Arabic, but well, you could say in Arabic, in transliteration. But then when I actually learned how to read Arabic, I think because I was so used to saying the mispronounced way I was saying it, like for years, 2 years of mispronouncing it, I never actually stopped to correct myself. So it was just like something that was like set on my tongue until like a few years after that, and like, oh, actually, I'm not pronouncing that right, and didn't realize because I didn't actually think about it.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, but mind you, in those days, I mean, internet was at its absolute beginning. Most people didn't have an email. All right. There was no MP3 was barely a thing yet. All right. We used to work with cassettes. That's with those days. So to get back to what I was in, I was so naive. I was number one, I was extremely naive. Number two, I was completely unaware about just the wealth of Islamic literature that's out there. So from my naivety, I walked into one of the prestigious bookstores of Brussels in Galerie des Princes, and went to the religion section and the shelf of Islam, and I bought a book written by a Zionist Jew. The title of the book was From Wahhabism to Bin Laden, Questioning Saudi Arabia. That was the first book. And the second book was a compilation of essays by Muslim thinkers on the post 9/11 development in the Ummah. And the book had a really nice cover. Okay, that's why I bought it. And that's I hadn't read anything to build my knowledge and to build my iman. I found reading the Quran very difficult. I had the French translation of the Quran. And Ramadan was coming up, so I was still hanging out with my Senegalese friends, and I was aware that fasting is from dawn to sunset, and that's about it. Like I entered into Ramadan without having read a single book on Islam in general or Ramadan in particular. That's the first thing. The second thing, I was completely unaware that there was something called Salat al-Jama'ah, congregational prayer. I did not know that existed, because in Senegal, with the people that I was hanging out with, it's done in Senegal, but not with the people that I was hanging out with. Right? They had never introduced me to that. They just did that, like one of them told me about Jumu'ah. That's
Even
it.
Jumu'ah? Oh, Jumu'ah, yeah. Okay.
No, Jumu'ah, that's it. Yeah. So he had told me that, I got to go Jumu'ah at least once every 3 weeks. So that's what I did. Okay. And I felt very uncomfortable in the masjid because I just felt awkward. I didn't understand anything. Everybody seems to know what's going on except for me. It was very, how to say, it was awkward. I felt out of place.
Was the khutbah in Arabic?
Yeah, but it was sometimes translated in French. It was in the Markaz Islami of Brussels. which in those days was run by hardcore Ikhwanis, but give credit where credit is due, they were doing a really good job. Obviously, there is things that they neglect because that's part of their manhaj, tawheed, etc. No, don't get into that. But, when it comes to the basics of the deen, they were very serious about it. Now, so Ramadan arrives. First thing I did wrong, I fasted the day before Ramadan as a warm-up, right? Prophet ﷺ explicitly forbade from doing so. As I said, I hadn't read a single book, all right? So I did that one, okay? All right, cool. First day of Ramadan now. I wake up between Fajr and Shuruq. I'm like, oh snap, let me just drink a glass of water so that I'll be sure to be able to drink a glass of water. All right. I didn't pray on time. I went to the masjid once. I found fasting extremely difficult. But I did fast. Okay. I did not, except for that first day where I had a glass of water, not knowing what I was doing.
You did better than me. I didn't understand the difference between Fajr and sunrise. So I knew that we fast from dawn, and in my mind, dawn is sunrise. So every single day, my fasting started at Shuruq. So you're better than me having it just one day. So.
Yeah. And Al-Muhim, I would go almost every day to the Senegalese family, and we'd break fast together. And these Senegalese, brother, these people, they know how to be social, They're so easygoing, they're so friendly, they're so simple. It's just such a pleasure hanging out with them. And so, it was humble, but wallahi, like iftar was wild, it was really fun. So I would just, I would try and pray Fajr, Dhuhr, and Asr before going to them. Sometimes I didn't, so I caught up everything over there, kind of thing. And then we'd pray Isha together, and then we'd have the Chebujen, traditional Senegalese fish and rice, and stay there until like 10, 11, something like that. Go back home and repeat the next day. Then arrives the 25th day of Ramadan. So Adama, my colleague from the uni, he tells me, listen, tomorrow is the night of destiny. So, what the heck is that? So listen, basically it boils down to, we're going to go to some sheikh's house and we're going to spend the whole night in prayer. I said, well, sounds really cool. Hey, I'm in, count me in. So we go there. So bro, we land in one of the most dubious personalities' home in Brussels. All right. So it's a Senegalese sheikh. Now he's from a different cult. Okay. So Mama and Adama, he was from the same cult, Al Muridiyya, but this guy here was a Tijani. So the Tijanis from Jazair and Morocco, but them Senegalese Tijanis, bro, they're those that snatched me were Tijanis. Okay. Anyway, so back in Senegal, they're all at war with each other, but out in the world, they understand that they gotta hold tight. All right, we're on the same team here. Okay. So anyway, so it's super atmosphere. The sheikh is there, loads of people, Senegalese. There's me and one other white dude. All right, all the rest Senegalese. Now the white dude was French. Now this dude, however, he seemed to be very deep into the thing, all right, because he was knowledgeable about what they're doing and all their dhikr, and he could see he was following conversations and whatnot, so he was deep into it, and I was clueless. I'm sitting there clueless, don't know what's going on, don't know what's being discussed. All of a sudden the food comes. I understood what that was about, and then we go into his attic that was made into a musalla. So those were like the typical traditional Brussels houses that are like on over 3 to 4 floors, and you have an attic that has kind of like 2 levels, and it was all transformed into a musalla. And so we started doing Qiyam al-Layl. So I was tuning in. Obviously, same thing. I didn't understand a word of Salah, but it was really cool. All right. I didn't realize behind who I was, but the man is known to be a big, witchcraft master. Belgian politicians come to him, athletes come to him.
Actual black magic, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, brother.
subhanallah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I prayed my first Laylatul Qadr behind him.
Behind the
Okay.
wizard.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah. And then the journey of Jahl is not over. Okay. And I get to meet I get to meet some younger brothers, etc. So there was a Congolese brother that I got very close to. His name is Yusuf. And so he says, listen, he was with another brother. Say, hey, yo, let's go to the Markaz for Fajr. The Markaz is the Markaz Islam. It's like the central mosque of Brussels. So he says, come with us. We'll drop you home after that. You gotta imagine we're like about an hour before Fajr. My man left. I don't have a clue what's going on. All right. So
This is directly after the prayer in the Sheikh's house.
Yeah. We're still in the Sheikh's house. Okay, we're still in the Sheikh's house. Yeah, long night, brother. So anyway, what happened is that now I go and do wudu. So I use the bathroom. I do wudu, and I feel something. And it was wadi, the liquid that comes out. That's and so I'm like, oh snap! I gotta do ghusl. Like I'm in this dude's house, and I believe that I'm in janaba now. I was like, oh, what's this all about? I didn't understand. My mind just blocked. So the brother said, yeah, go ask the sheikh. It's a sheikh. You ask him. He's a sheikh. So he told me, well, you gotta do ghusl. So hey, it's the bathroom. Go to ghusl. So I did the ghusl right then and there. It was winter, all right. So there was no towel. So I put on my clothes back while being all wet, and off we went to the Markaz Islam. And that was my first Salat Jama'ah, other than Jumu'ah and this Qiyam al-Layl. That was the first time I prayed Salat al-Fajr in the masjid. I was
in the Markaz, the Fajr,
yeah. I was there, and it's like, what happened here? Why all these people here? I was confused to a point. And anyway, went home, slept till half an hour before Maghrib that day. Okay. Quickly prayed all my prayers, jumped on the subway, joined my Senegalese guys. It was already beyond iftar time, ate with them, and until the end of Ramadan, and that was it. So it was a Ramadan of clumsiness. And really the cause was ignorance. And it's just, like in Islam, if you're stagnating, it's because you have not spent enough time reading the right books and sitting in the right lessons. It's really as simple as that. If you're reading good books and you're in good lessons, but you're still not moving forward, it means there's still something lacking. There's something you need. There's some piece of knowledge you need in order to fix yourself from the inside, to rewire the system so that you can, as a matter of fact, put things into practice that will help you move forward. And, okay, well, I want to say, after this Ramadan, I went downhill drastically, very quickly. I actually completely stopped praying, I guess within a month from that Ramadan.
Subhanallah.
And the reason was, number one, the fact that this wrong way of praying became such a burden on me. And number two is that this book that I was reading by this Zionist, it was designed to, number one, make you detest Salafiyya and, you know, portray it as some extremist kind of ideology, etc., the way they like doing. But number two, so you could say, oh, okay, I'm just going to stay away from that. But no, number two, he puts in very, how to say, subtly stuff that makes you just doubt Islam as a whole. And it's all lies, like as I found out later.
Yeah.
So my practice was at level 0, and my mind was wrong because of these shubuhat that I was taking in from this filthy book.
Yeah.
And so I collapsed. I stopped praying, and I felt really, really, really bad. I felt that I was just, I cannot describe how miserable I was. And I stayed like that for probably weeks, maybe a month or two. And then I said, no, I can't continue this. This just does not work. So I decided I was going to do two things. That I was going to fast, and I was going to pray on time. I still have no clue that there is such a
This was
thing as Salat
during your
al-Jama'ah.
low time.
Yeah. That's
You made
like
the
when
commitment to do that.
Yeah. I said, like, I got to get back on track. And I decided that the way to get back on track was to do that.
Okay.
And so I started fasting and praying.
Fasting outside of Ramadan.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Because, you know, for the story, like, you know, those two brothers that were at the boarding school, I remember reading the Bible in those days. Like I was reading the Bible on a daily basis in those years. And I remember one day I read that, I believe it was one of Jesus' companions decided, or was fasting for 3 days. I don't remember the context. I don't remember, but, you know, I knew it was fasting 3 days. So I went into so it was lunchtime at school. So I run into the youngest one of those two brothers who I was very close to. I say, hey, yo, Jeremy, come on, let's go lunch together. I say, no, I'm fasting. I'm like, what? It's not Ramadan right now. I say, yeah, but I decided to fast 3 days. Brother, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked at him, what are you saying? He said, yeah, in our religion it's recommended every once in a while to fast for 3 days. And this one, I just realized that, yo, you read the Bible, you look at those that resemble what you see in the Bible, it's the Muslims and not the Christians. It's as simple as that. Anybody who can get beyond their biases and you just really look at what it boils down to, you see the Muslims are practicing what you're talking about and leaving out. And from that moment, I really knew that, yo, one day or another, I'll be upon that. And subhanAllah, as I said, when I was in that low period, I mean, I only knew two things from the religion, which is fasting and praying. I was clueless of anything else.
Yeah.
And so, subhanAllah, I started fasting and I started praying on time, not at the masjid because I didn't know that existed. And Akhi, I believe it was within 3 days that I get a phone call, and it was a young Moroccan that I had met 2 years prior at a Kung Fu club. This guy always intrigued me. I wanted to talk to him, but, you know, the situation was never right. And, you know, I left the club and we you know, I didn't have his phone. I didn't know anything about him. I just saw him at the club. SubhanAllah, his phone rings, is him. Is this Fulan? I'm like, yeah, this is Munir. I couldn't believe it. My mind just went blank. I'm like, where are you? I say, listen, I met Jeremy, so one of those two brothers, because they were living in the same neighborhood. He said you became Muslim. I said, that's right, listen, and I want to talk to you. I say, okay, look, I'm going to Mecca tomorrow, but I'll get in touch with you when I'm back. I'm like, when are you coming back? He said, 1 month. He was going on Umrah for a month, all right? So anyway, from that moment on, it was a steep learning curve. It went up fast. Yeah, and subhanAllah, In those days, like after I might have fasted for 5 days in a row. I don't know, was it during those days of fasting or after those days of fasting that I went to visit a Senegalese friend of mine, and he was living in a kind of a side street from one of the big boulevards of Brussels. And I realized that meters away from his home, there's an Islamic library. I didn't know that such a thing existed, an Islamic library, a bookshop that specializes in selling books of deen. So I enter the thing and I see, three brothers, with the short trousers, with the beard and whatnot, the kufi, and I just felt super intimidated, So I said, Salam alaikum. They looked at me, they said, Wa alaikum salam. So, a lot of shyness. I entered between the bookstore and I just saw a book, biography of the Prophet. Yeah, let me grab that. Hop, paid, and out. And it was a Rahiq al-Makhtoum. It was a pretty bad translation in French, but it was good for me at that time. And that's when I started. Learning my deen. So I became a very big client at that particular bookstore. Bought books, bought tapes. It was the good old time with cassettes before all this social media, bizarre stuff that we're going through now. And that's my second Ramadan had nothing to do with the first one. It was masjid every day. It was Taraweeh almost every day. It was a real Ramadan. It was a real experience. And subhanallah, I remember, so I had started going to the masjid in the meantime, before the second Ramadan. And so Ramadan starts at Maghrib. So we prayed.
The month of Ramadan.
Yeah, the month of Ramadan starts at Maghrib. All right. So your first salah in Ramadan is going to be Maghrib, and then Isha, and then Taraweeh, and Fajr. And so you actually pray 3 fara'id before you start fasting.
3 obligatory prayers.
Yeah, 3 obligatory prayers. So on the first obligatory prayer, which was Dhuhr, so it was my first half day of fasting in this Ramadan. Wallahi, I could not believe how easy that prayer was for me. It blew my mind how you got to strive to gain this khushu', this humility, this concentration in prayer.
Yeah.
That day, it came like that. And that's when I understood that, wow, yeah, this month has something special. I had fasted before and prayed, so I knew it was not just fasting.
Yeah.
It was this month. There is something to it that we can't necessarily describe. But
the shayateen are, the devils are locked. You know what I mean? You can really feel that very often, subhanAllah.
Absolutely. And subhanAllah, like case in point, after that second Ramadan, I was back. I was at uni in nighttime in those days. Like I had switched to evening classes, and the night of Eid, so Ramadan had just finished. I noticed that police sirens were going off non-stop while we were in class for 3 hours. So I'm like, yeah, you see, the shayateen are loose again. All right, the times of peace is gone. It's back to normal now. Life is taking its course again.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I think from what you discussed as well, even with myself, I'd say like the first couple of years that I was Muslim, it's almost like kind of most of the things that I was doing prior to that were similar, but I knew just about kind of like the basics, like the 5 pillars, so I knew about, okay, the prayer, I knew about Ramadan, zakah, but I was broke anyway, so there was no zakah going on, Hajj, and obviously the shahada being the first. But so those kind of 3 pillars, I knew about that, but everything else I was doing the same. But I was very blessed I'm not sure if it was my first, I think it was my first actually Ramadan, but I was kind of amongst some activists and university students around kind of central London, SOAS, and different University of London unis. And it's actually amazing because I've seen the growth of this thing. and may Allah reward the brother for it, and guide him and guide us all. But there was a guy who was a student in SOAS uni, who started this thing called like open iftar. And it's kind of like, the idea was like to create, it's a bit like lovely jubbly kind of open iftar for everyone to come to and this, that, whatever. But I basically found out about it and I was like, oh, this is quite cool. I wasn't Muslim for that long. And it was basically like, group of Muslims, non-Muslims could come if they wanted and stuff. And they would meet up, have this kind of like open iftar where everyone would bring things. And then afterwards, we would pray, obviously, Maghrib in congregation, eat and stuff. And then actually there was a Taraweeh in, for those who wanted. I think a lot of people didn't. They just kind of broke fast and then went off. But there was maybe a group, maybe 10, 15 people who then went and prayed. And this actually, the brother who started the idea, he led the Taraweeh in like SOAS University prayer room. So that was kind of like my first introduction. I thought it was amazing. Like, I'm listening to him, his recitation, may Allah reward him, was amazing. And it's funny because now, years later, I've actually seen this open iftar thing. It's become like a massive thing. It's called like open iftar. They did one at like the Royal Albert Hall and like all this stuff. But it was like some little humble thing. And in a way, it was quite nice because that was like my introduction to I guess praying in congregation, praying in Taraweeh, because after that, I didn't really go to like Taraweeh much in the masjid. I kind of went, and I didn't know that the congregational prayer was an obligation for men or anything of the sort of that. So I would just, kind of on and off go. And some people, they'd say, oh, this Taraweeh thing, but I wasn't really that involved. And I do remember the one time, a bit similar to your story of with the sheikh or the wizard or whatever we call him, but I have a very good friend of mine, a Libyan friend, who is there with me from the beginning of Islam, and he basically said like, look, you've got to come, we're gonna do like, I don't know, it was like in the last 10 nights, I can't remember, he was like, we're going to. And they would go to the Qatari Masjid in London, which is basically attached to like the Qatari embassy, right? They have this mosque there in central London. He was like, yeah, we're going to go do this thing. It's like blah, blah, blah. And he described to me similar to what you described. And I was like, whoa, that sounds like amazing and pretty intense and something. And we went there and it was like this all night thing and eating in the masjid. And, one thing I would say is like, I think at that stage in my Islam, I don't think I would have been able to do that like every night in the last 10 or like every night in the Ramadan. I don't think I was ready for that. But I do think just like having a couple of those experiences here and there, especially spending such like a prolonged period time in the masjid in the Ramadan, it's like a really amazing experience by which and there was another time actually, like the same Libyan brother, he invited me to do itikaf in this masjid in Paddington. And I was like, look, I'm going to come and try and do as much as I can, but I had like some work and I couldn't completely commit to it. So I was going like for a couple of days or like for a whole night or whatever. And I just remember like, for those hours that you'd spent in the masjid, let's say you'd spent like 8 hours all at night in a masjid, like you'd kind of like look outside, and the only way I can really describe it is it was almost like felt like the outside world became like some really alien place, and the masjid was just like this amazing, warm, like brotherhood of vibes and just like nice feeling, and really became very homely, and you'd kind of like, especially this masjid in particular that I did this first itikaf in, and this was like, like I said, it was only a couple of days here and there, or maybe a night or whatever. And it was maybe my third or fourth Ramadan, I think maybe my third one. And I just, remember like looking outside, and this is in like Paddington, London, and you're like looking outside, like just like the environment looks so like alien and dirty, and like you're just like, oh no, I don't want to go out there, but I have to. So it was quite funny. But I definitely recommend, like, if it's someone's like first Ramadan or second Ramadan or whatever, and they've never really spent like a prolonged period of time, even just to go and say like, oh, I'm gonna go like at Asr and stay all the way till iftar and have iftar and just try and stay then as long as I can. Like, it really has an amazing effect on you.
And especially most masjids in the UK, that they are doing iftar, isn't it? So it's a nice opportunity, especially, you know, it's your first Ramadan, even if not your first Ramadan, if it's your any Ramadan and you're alone,
Yeah,
to be able to break fast with other people breaking their fast, it's a nice experience.
yeah, definitely. And
Most
I think
universities,
even then as well,
masjids, yeah.
I had a lot of good advice. I mean, in that itikaf as well, it was like, that masjid, they were quite close upon the sunnah and stuff. And I had a lot of stuff. I think I was still involved in music and I was still involved in different things. So I had a lot of brothers who were like, they advised, but in a very like non-judgmental way. You know what I mean? That it
That's
was a
good.
very nice way of giving advice, and just like, even some of them, like, I don't think they could see like maybe that I was involved in music or I was involved in something, and they kind of came at a very like, like, look, yeah, you're doing your thing, but you'll see, like, once you start to like
Mm.
learn knowledge and once you start to do these things, you'll see like how important this is or how important that is. And that really like that experience as well made me want to learn more. So I guess it's similar to when you started going to that bookshop and you're starting to have that hunger for knowledge. It makes you want to be like, "Oh, hang on, why do I not know enough about the
Mm.
religion?" Subhanallah.
You know, one thing I find amazing, like especially looking back, I'm thinking my second Ramadan, not my first, and going to some south part. I was in London at the time, going to some part of South London. I think you call it South London. I'm not sure. Almost every night, and Abdullah's first Taraweeh reminded me, and likewise yours too, Ed. Like, I think we must have prayed for like 2 hours, and it was winter in those days, and it must have been 2 hours every night. And of course, I didn't understand any Arabic, and so I didn't understand any of the Quran. Yet, those 2 hours were lovely. You know,
Mm,
it's amazing. Like, you don't know any Arabic, can't understand anything, but you're standing there and really, don't think enjoying is the right word, but you know, yeah, we can say enjoying the experience
yeah,
of praying the night. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
mashallah.
even if you don't understand Arabic, there is sujood. You don't
Yeah,
need to
true.
Yeah,
understand sujood. Just the
yeah, yeah,
action itself
Mm,
is
yeah.
just, it's not something outside of Islam. Wherever you
Mm,
look,
mm,
subhanAllah, is something that's just unique to us. And you sujood being prostration for those who don't know the word.
yeah,
But subhanAllah, AK, you saying about being non-judgmental. In my second Ramadan, I had a really bad experience one day. And so on the second Ramadan, alhamdulillah, I was not at every Taraweeh, but I was quite regular. So alhamdulillah, we would break fast at the masjid. There'd be food in the Markaz Islami. And it was pretty easy to get to the first row. So before Salat al-Isha, the Imam would do a little dars in Arabic, wouldn't understand anything, no big deal. And then, it would start. SubhanAllah, one night, between, they would take a break between the fourth and the fifth rak'ah. And same, it was winter, and there was the radiator that was just in front of the first row. And Akhi, the praying hall was packed. Brother, it was hot. And you had this radiator that's just like, radiating in your face. You're on the first row, you're roasting, brother. And so I took the initiative to stand up and open the window. And as I turned around from having opened the window, bro, there's a guy. He gave me a look. I cannot describe the look he had given. If his eyes were weapons, I would have been turned into cheese, brother. Brother, it's undescribable, the look that he, and akhi, it made me feel so uncomfortable. So I'm like, well, like, what did I do wrong? And you're showing me close the window. So okay, so I closed the window. So I prayed 2 more rak'ah and I left because I just felt so bad. And the next day was Jumu'ah. So because it was winter, there was only 2 hours between Salat al-Jumu'ah and Asr. And so a lot of people,
short
because
days,
it's just so compressed, okay?
Yeah.
So a lot of people would just stay all the way from Jumu'ah till Maghrib. So subhanAllah, after Jumu'ah, I do a little bit of afkar, and maybe I had a book with me, I read a bit, and I got the left, and a guy, he just, Moroccan dude, he was in suit and tie, but, he was there reading Quran. He had a beaming face. He caught my hand. Salaam alaikum, brother. Have a seat, please. Who are you? How are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. We chatted a bit. I didn't understand why he was so friendly. And then he came out. He said, listen, last night you left Taraweeh. Was it because of the way this guy looked at you? And I was just embarrassed. I'm like, no, I felt tired. I said, look, wallahi, I saw the way this guy looked at you. I was so angry that he looked at you this way. It was so out of place. It's and he really nailed it, the way he described the way this guy looked at me. But then when I saw you leave Salah afterwards, my anger just had no limit. So and he just told me, look, you're gonna come across knuckleheads on your way. Right? There's a lot of people that are gonna be very nice to you, are very happy to have you amongst them, but then there is the usual grumpy smurf who's lurking somewhere. He's gonna talk to you bad, just make problems. I don't know what. They're just skilled at doing that, okay? And you just gotta learn to deal with these people. They're part of the scenery. They might be only 2% or even 0.2%, but they're there. And you just gotta learn to ignore them. It's a part of the skill.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on, man. And it's one of those things where sometimes you'd wish that more people were upon that understanding, right? But people just have different levels of understanding, and it comes back to that thing of like, I think some people, especially if they don't know reverts or whatever, they don't realize like the amount of like you said, ignorance that number one a revert starts with, and then on top of that, how their journey has developed and all these kind of things. So there's so many different factors. And actually, I mean, just one little thing to mention on that topic is like, one thing I think I've learned with age as well is like, there's so many issues and problems that people have on like their day-to-day basis, aside from just, being a revert to Islam or whatever, whether it's like through like death of people in your family or like illness or whatever, that these struggles and traumas and whatever are actually like unseen. So you won't see that on someone's face. You don't know what they've been through by just like looking at them. And therefore you have to like approach people, especially if you want to tell someone that they're like doing something wrong or they're doing something that you think is not correct. Firstly, you need to check yourself to make sure that you're actually going to give them the right information and the right advice, right? That's the first thing. Before you even give the advice, make sure, should I even be giving this advice? And then secondly, you have to like give the advice in a way that is going to be like people are going to accept it, and people that is going to be palatable, or that people are going to accept the advice. Because if you're not going to give it in a way that is going to be susceptible, or that the people are going to take that advice on board, you may as well not give the advice, to be honest. Like the advice may well actually do the opposite and push people away. And I think as a revert, you have two things. Sometimes you have that thing of like, they're saying this, that, whatever. For example, like when I was first Muslim, people saying, music's haram and this, that, whatever. And then someone else would tell me, no, it's fine, it's halal. So I'd be like, no, it's halal. So-and-so said it's halal, whatever. So that if people don't give you that advice in a good way, it can kind of push you in the opposite direction. And then you want to be like, nah, and kind of fight against it. Or you can kind of like, become quite like, I'd want to say almost like shy. Like you don't be like that person in the room who's like, yeah, I know nothing about this, and seem like you're an idiot, right? Because no one wants to stand in front of like a huge group of people and be like, yeah, I'm an ignorant, and I know that takes a bit of confidence in of itself, right? So if people are more understanding in that regard, I think it would make a world of difference. Inshallah, we have guys. We've almost hit an hour here, so we'll try to move on to the next section. I think we can hopefully recontinue this conversation maybe in the next 2 weeks, or and maybe with another guest as well. But maybe we'll invite Abdullah back as well, because I think it's been a great conversation. But in terms of the Revert news and contributions, we've had an interesting question here from Joe Baz, which I know nothing about. He said, Salam alaikum salam, Joe Baz. What's your take on Ramadan Tajala? I don't know what Ramadan Tajala is, Joe.
No, do
I'm
I.
not sure if it's
Allah,
a person or an action or I don't know.
is that Ramadan Tajala? I've never heard of it, to be honest. Ramadan Tajala. The first thing that when I've Googled it comes up is like a song maybe or something. So I don't know if it's some kind of song or nasheed or whatever. I would say better to go with the Quran instead of the Ramadan Tajala. But maybe Joe will explain to us. Also from Instagram, we had an advice from someone who said what was their top tips for new Muslims. They said make suhoor always, even if it's just a bite. Stay hydrated and bear good patience for his sake, i.e., for Allah's sake, and you got this. So a bit of encouragement. And I think, like on this suhoor as well, Carl, I think you've got an important
Yeah,
benefit
I
as
want to
well,
add to that
because
one. It's I used to in the early days think, oh, think of it in terms of proteins and carbohydrates and bananas and what type of things are gonna be slow burning and all this sort of thing. Then when I was in Jeddah, our sheikh there, he mentioned the hadith of the best suhoor for the believer is tamar, dried dates. And that what that means is that your meal is the dried dates and water. And when I started having suhoor of just dried dates, no porridge, no juice, no whatever, the dried dates, and also having you know faith in that what the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam advised with is the best. Those dry dates are enough for me to go the whole day. I normally run for do a 5K before Maghrib as well, sometimes after Asr during Ramadan. So yeah, dates and water are more than enough.
excellent. So that's a good benefit, I think. But I don't think it's definitely important as well for the new Muslims to have that suhoor, get the water in, and if anything as well, it will kind of boost your confidence mentally. But like Carl said, if you take the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, there's definitely going to be a blessing in that, inshallah. Now we come to my favorite part of the show. I don't know if Carl's brought his words, but Abdullah, I'm not sure if you're aware. This is the word association section, and I'll be giving you some words. We want your first thoughts off the top of your head. Be as wise and succinct and I don't know as possible. So I'll go for the guest first, Abdullah. The first word is iftar.
Pleasure.
Nice, excellent. Carl, Eid.
Eid, Salah.
Salah. Okay, good.
Yeah, we pray at Eid.
Abdullah, dates.
Necessary.
Necessary. Carl, Tadawir.
Oh, Taraweeh, Quran.
Quran. Abdullah, spirituality.
Too much to talk to just summarize, but linking the inside to the outside. That's spirituality.
Excellent. And Carl, we'll go with the last one for you, Carl. Community.
Community. Family. It can sometimes, be I mean, if you haven't got Muslim family, your community can really support you.
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, so we'll end it there. I think that was an excellent round there. Very good, very hot on your toes there. And yeah, any final thoughts? We're going to have, hopefully, just to give you an idea, in the next 2 weeks, we should do another episode just about Ramadan preparation and things like this. Maybe we will invite Abdullah back on, and there's a couple of other guests I'm trying to get selected. Joe's asked if I'm selective with the guests. A little bit selective, Joe, but if you have an idea for a guest, do message or comment on the videos and let us know. And hopefully as well, we will have a couple of episodes during Ramadan. We may pre-record the episodes just because of scheduling. And hopefully, we can get some inspirational stories, particularly about Arabic, Quran, and all things to do with Ramadan. And if I leave, Abdullah, have you got any final words to say, anything to add at the end of the episode here?
Well, final words is, if there is anything you can learn from my story, is that you got to do away with your ignorance. In order to prepare for Ramadan, number one, get yourself a book on the rulings of Ramadan. Number two, get yourself a book about worship. In other words, the books of rulings is how to perform the outward actions of, be it fasting or salah, and there are books that specialize on the inward actions of worship. And then take Ramadan as much as you can. Push yourself up the hill. Don't push yourself over the cliff. Don't leave yourself at the bottom of the hill. No, push yourself up the hill gently, but steadily. Slow and steady wins the race. That's what I had to say. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. What about yourself, Carl? Any final tips or thoughts on top of your suhoor benefit?
Yeah, I think, it's the month of the Quran, so spend as much time with the Quran as you can, whether that's listening or reading or in the prayer. I think, many of us, when we think of Ramadan coming, probably the last, or it shouldn't be the last thing on our minds, but one of the last things we think about is fasting, because that's a given. We're going to be fasting. But I think when I think about Ramadan coming, the first thing that comes to my head is, oh, Taraweeh, the night prayer. So yeah.
I think one of the things as well I found kind of useful as well to some extent is sometimes reading in English, or sometimes watching, for example, like one of the videos with the Quran and the English translation, perhaps like before the Taraweeh prayer, so that could be useful for people that don't perhaps have as much Arabic. You can kind of there's a lot of videos on YouTube where they might have like whatever juz of, or even that you can go on the Haram and you can see, for example, the day one Ramadan in the Haram. That's probably what maybe recited in the masjid in day one, and it will have the English translation and the Arabic as well you can listen to. So it could give you some idea. If you start picking up some of the Arabic, some of the words, you might become more accustomed. And I think that's helpful as well, because then you might be in the Taraweeh, you're listening and you think, oh yeah, this is something I've heard. So that's something that I've found useful and helped me to understand some aspects of the Quran. So yeah, I definitely, and I found that incredibly useful as well in the beginning of my Islam, to like watch a video with the Quran and the English translation at the same time to kind of link up the two, inshallah. So yeah, that's all we've got time for. We've kind of pushed on a bit, but I think we've got a lot more to say, hopefully for another episode in a couple of weeks on the Ramadan, and hopefully to prepare you for Ramadan. And Jazakallah khair to Abdullah and Carl for joining me, and take care everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thanks a lot يا إخوان.